JD. Welcome to Music Talk.
Great to be here, Vanya.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a conversational thing where we talk about music, about life, about some technical details, about philosophical details, everything.
Great.
What it is to be a musician. And maybe first you can shortly introduce yourself for maybe somebody who doesn't know who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name's JD Walter, and I'm an educator and a performer, traveling jazz musician, recording artist, produce a little bit. And I met Vanya when he was getting his master's degree at the Prince Claus Conservatory. And now we're in the midst of no man's land where, during the COVID virus, where I hope everybody can be safe and be as productive as they can. I think sometimes musicians wish for this extra time, and now they have it. And I hope they're able to survive and eat food and be safe and make use of this time to practice.
Yeah. So. Yes. Yeah, we're gonna talk about what we can do and how can we work on ourselves during this thing that is happening now.
Right.
First, I wanna congratulate you on your latest release, Dressed in a Song.
Thank you.
I think the recording turned out very personal, and I once commented you on this. I said it is very you. It is very JD Walter.
Yeah, it was a very personal record for many reasons. Throughout the recording of this record, I had gone through some health issues. I had a vocal operation because I had just been on tour for so much that I had hurt myself. And also, when I was about to have this operation, they found out that there was something wrong with my heart that had been going on for years, and I didn't know what it was, why I wasn't feeling well. And they finally discovered my heart was beating backwards, that I had something called severe atrial fibrillation. And so they had to, not open heart surgery, but they had to go through my femoral arteries in my legs up into my heart and burn a wall of my heart to stop electrical impulses. So all that being said, I wasn't allowed to tour for a while. I wasn't allowed to travel. I wasn't allowed to exercise. And in addition to that, I wasn't sure if my voice was going to be the same. So wow. It was a tough period of time. And so I had recorded a few songs before any of the operations. And then I recorded the rest of the songs after the operations within the last year or so. And so it was stretched out over this period of pain and struggle and beauty in rediscovering who I am and reassessing where I want to go in life. And so a lot of that emotional stress and reflection, I think, is in the music, is in the stories of the music, of the original music, and then is just present in the record itself. So yeah, it's very personal. You're right.
Wow. And you recorded it with different musicians, mostly duos.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit? Where did you record it? In different places or in one place?
I recorded in one place. The concept of the record was, I had seen many records. Herbie Hancock did a record with a different singer on each track. A number of people have done this type of thing. Pianists who have a different singer on each track. And I thought, well, I've never seen a singer make a record with a different piano player on each track. And so that was my brainstorm. And so then I started with a whole list of piano players on a wall, ones that I wanted to play with who I hadn't played with before, and others who I had played with, who are amazing, who I wanted to include, because music should be a reflection of your life to some degree. And oftentimes I think, I believe that records should be a documentary or a documentation of where I am musically and emotionally and spiritually at a particular time in my life. And so I have a different pianist on each track of the record, and then on the last track of the record, I even have 5 of the 6 piano players playing at the same time. And I tracked it. I tracked them all at different times, and then I put it together like a puzzle where sometimes 1 piano player is playing, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and then it switches to do 2 different piano players. So it was really an homage to the great pianists that I had worked with over the years, in addition to the stories that are going along with it. And I recorded it at Samurai Hotel recording studio in New York City, with an old dear friend of mine who owns the studio and is really probably has the top jazz recording studio in New York City, and just a great engineer. And then I had recorded half the album myself, and I brought in a producer named Al Pryor, who was a friend but also more of a mentor, and had produced me on a record with a trumpet player named Sean Jones. I had Sean invited me to sing an original song, an arrangement that I had written, and then he asked me to sing on 2 more songs on his record called Kaleidoscope, and that was for Mack Avenue Records. And so I called Al and asked him if he'd be interested in producing this record on the back end. So he came in, made adjustments to some things, and then suggestions on how we could move forward with finishing the record, and got involved in the mix. And he's just got great ears. He won a Grammy, I think, not this year, but the last year for Cecile McLaurin. He won the Grammy winning producer for that record. So he's quite skilled, and he's been around, and he's won other Grammys, and he's just an amazing person. So the combination of him and this recording studio being with an engineer I'm comfortable with, and then the excitement of recording with predominantly piano players that I had worked with for years, in addition to some piano players that I hadn't worked with before, just made for a really nice experience for me. So
great. Yeah, great recording, not only for vocalists or piano players to check out, but also for any other musicians. So I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna leave a link to your album so people
Thanks.
can go and check out.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you can find links to the record also in my link tree on Instagram, which is JD Walter Sings, and then my website, there's links to it, which is just jdwalter.com, and you can find it on Spotify and iTunes and Bandcamp, a number of places you can find it. And I think I have a copy of it here for the visual people. Yeah, there's a copy of it right here. Getting some reflection right here. But
great design. Who made the design for art cover?
Well, there was a designer in England. I had a great photographer, and so the photographer took great shots. And with the photographer and the designer in England, she put together, of course, options for me. And it came together beautifully. I thought it's very, very, very strong. It's a strong presence, and so I was very, very happy with how that turned out. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, now I'm going to ask you some questions.
Yes. Let's get to the meat and potatoes.
All right. First, I wanted to ask you about places that formed your musicality.
Okay. Places that formed my musicality. The first place, of course, was the home. You know, my family, and came from a family of 6 people. My mother was a great singer and pianist, and so she started me with singing as a very young child, and tutoring me, educating me on singing in different languages, and then I was working professionally as a child from maybe age 6 or 7. I started singing as a hired singer with a professional men and boys choir at a Anglican church. Episcopal church is a big tradition of men and boy choir singing. And my older sister was a great concert pianist and a fine singer. And my other sisters, both great voices and played other instruments. And so it was competitive just within the family. So it's great when it starts off at home. You know, we're all trying to get attention from our moms and dads. And so if my older sister was doing very well and getting attention, excuse me, I wanted attention too. So I wanted to excel. But then, and when I say the home, I would say even then the next step, aside from the church being a big influence on my musical background, and my love for classical music, was a neighbor that moved in who happened to be an iconic jazz educator and great saxophonist, sound like Cannonball. You know, he was just an amazing alto player, but a great teacher. His name's Tom Stroman. And so I didn't study with him much. I did a little bit, but what happened more was, when we were next door neighbors, so I would hear his jazz band practicing, his jazz quartet practicing next door. And as a kid, I would say, can I watch? Yes, you watch, but you can't say anything, just sit there and watch. So I'd start watching the rehearsals. And then we'd also have, the biggest contribution I think he made in my life was that we had philosophical conversations over the fence, literally over the fence in the backyard. I would be working in the backyard. You know, my dad would make me do whatever work I had to do, and I'd have music playing, whether it was Weather Report or whether it was Blakey, or because I was into drummers, because I was also playing drums as a kid. So I was into a lot of drummers and Philly Joe, and even more progressive drummers like Bill Bruford. As a kid, you know, I was more attracted to sounds. The synthesizer, you know, I'm telling you how old I am by telling you this. The Moog synthesizer really only came about in the 70s when I was a kid. And so I was fascinated by this. There was I was already a geek where I had lots of records of, you know, Chopin and Liszt and Bach, of course, and Mozart and Beethoven and Ravel and Debussy, et cetera, and a lot of choral music. But there was this record. There was a synthesizer player named Walter Carlos, and he came out with a record called Switched on Bach, which was Bach played on synthesizer. And I thought as a kid that this was the coolest thing, that these sounds were being made, but it was still Bach. He eventually changed his name to Wendy Carlos because he changed his identity a little bit. But it was a famous record called Switched on Bach. And I was really into this record. And I knew maybe something was different in my life when I was so excited about records like this. And I would show my neighborhood friends, my childhood friends that I would play with, and I would say, you're not going to believe this. This guy's playing Bach, but on a synthesizer. And they would say, don't you have any Beatles, or, you know, what is this? You know, so I stopped sharing music with my, you know, playmates that I grew up like playing football with, and that the guys that I played with as little kids. And I just, later on started to develop some big musical relationships. And then I went to a school called the American Boy Choir School, which was by audition, and I had to live there. We traveled the world. So I started touring the world, maybe age 12 and 13 years old. I was traveling around the world, working with the Metropolitan Opera, working with the London Symphony, working with great composers, arrangers, conductors, sang a lot of functions at the White House, met Nancy and Ronald Reagan and Barbara and George Bush. And that was an amazing experience. Came out of there, my voice changed, and because I couldn't sing, started playing drums more. That's when I started playing in clubs, started playing jazz in clubs. And then after a year or so, my voice started coming back. Someone said, start singing again. I started to tell me when to stop, because I mean, this is all just like, it's not.
Maybe you can connect it to the other question about, was there moments when you realized you're fully committed to music?
No, I never really thought of it in terms of that. I thought of it in terms of, this is what I do. This is what I love to do. And, you know, even as a 6 and 7 year old, I was getting paid to play
Hmm.
music. And then I, you know, when I was 13 and 14 and I'm playing in clubs, I'm playing maybe 6 gigs a month, but at that age, that was a lot, you know, 6 gigs in a month. And then further in high school, I'm playing more and more. I didn't even want to go to college. I'm like, why would I go to college? I'm already doing what I love to do.
Hmm.
And so it was never a second thought what I was going to do. But then I went to school. I went to the University of North Texas on a scholarship, and yeah, I just never thought, it was never a question, what am I going to do? Of course it's going to be
Okay.
music, you know. So
All right.
that's all I'd ever did. That's all I ever wanted to do, you know.
Okay. And when you moved to New York City?
I moved to New York in 1998, and it was very planned. I had moved from Texas, where I went to college, and during that period also, I had moved to Europe to study with Deborah Brown. This is 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, to study with a singer. I wanted to study with a singer.
Hmm.
And so I studied with Deborah Brown for about a year. And then I came back to Texas and I was playing rock and roll and writing a lot. And actually, it was a great experience for me because now I was writing a lot of music. I was starting to understand how to write music and how to have rehearsals with the band regularly. So that changed my life a lot. Moved back to the north, outside of Philadelphia, and started booking clubs and playing in clubs. And I knew I wanted to move to New York. So I was bringing people down from New York to play with me at these clubs that I booked. And I started networking New York. So I started playing New York in maybe 1995, the mid 90s. And so I was already playing there with frequency before I moved. So it was very thought out. You know, I want to move to New York, but if you move there cold, as it were, you don't know anybody. But I had already networked and I'd been playing with a lot of great players that I continue to play with. And so it was an easier transition. It wasn't easy, but it was an easier transition because I was already playing with people who were there and had names. So my name was around a little bit. And so that was very helpful, you know.
All right. All right. Okay. Maybe let's move to the situation that we are now in, and maybe you can have some, not tips, but a piece of advice for musicians, what they can work on, how do they prepare to the period when everything is settled down and everything is going on as usual. What would you focus on during this period?
You know, it's kind of funny. I was on a tour with Billy Hart, and Billy said, "I need to make so much money per concert." And I said, "Okay." And then one of the cities where we were traveling to, the club only offered a certain amount of money, and I said, "Hey," and I didn't want to give him my money, you know. I wanted to make something. I needed to eat, and I said, "You know, what am I going to do, Billy?" And he said, "I don't care what you do. I'm just telling you how much I need to make every day." Fair enough. I mean, he's a genius. He's a superstar. He's an icon. He's an incredible musician. He's somebody I respected. I said, "If I got you a master class, would that be cool?" He said, "Yeah." So I got him a master class that made up for the money, which made his total for the day fine. You know, he's happy. I take him to the master class, and I think this is I'm answering your question
Yeah.
through this story. So a lot of the questions that were coming from the students were really dumb questions that embarrassed me. You know, like
Okay.
the drummers would say, "What do you do when you get bored and you're playing the drums and you start looking around the room?" And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, but Billy Hart is a gentleman and also very intelligent. And he says, if I find myself being distracted and looking around the room when I should be in the music, maybe I need to go to museums more. Maybe I need to watch some more art movies. Maybe I need to be more involved in life and find out who I am so I can bring life experiences to the bandstand. All right, brilliant answer, right? Next stupid question. What would you do if you won $1 million? And I'm thinking, what kind of question is this? You know, and Billy Hart, again, the gentleman, And the great educator says, if I won $1 million, I would probably take less gigs and practice more. And so now we find ourselves in a time where it's very difficult to, well, it's impossible to play gigs. Yeah. So it's a perfect opportunity maybe for us to get some of our the holes in our playing, our deficiencies, and bring them up to speed. I haven't been doing as well as I would like to as far as practicing during this time period is concerned, but there's also a lot of business to get done and catch up on. A lot of times we complain we don't have time to get certain business things done. So I've been finding myself busy tackling certain things in the business, sitting at the computer, writing letters, applying for grants. Been doing a lot of free teaching. I have plans to, I hope, knock on wood, I hope I don't spoil it by saying it out loud, but maybe trying to finish a book that I had written, and I want to write a revision of the book. I've been getting together once a week with a friend, trying to write music, keep the creative juices of writing going on. As I said, I've been a little disappointed with myself that I haven't gotten as much done with the craft itself as I would have liked. But my advice, of course, would be to people is to maybe start taking care of some of the business aspects that are painful, whether it's dealing with, all the social media things, maybe it's dealing with applying for grants, investigating those things that school really doesn't teach us to do, that we have to maybe get involved with, things that are going to help us when things break, when all of this stops, and hopefully it will at some point. So, and there's also, I think, time for self-reflection, time for getting involved in things, like I said, when Billy Hart talked about maybe reading a book, maybe watching art movies, maybe, learning about something new, keep the imagination going, keeping the thought process going, what it is to be an artist, what it is to be a musician. These are important things.
Okay. And speaking about something outside of music, I want to talk to you about hobby. I know we have a hobby, and what it is to share passion for something else that is not music itself, and how does it help you to understand your personality, maybe, or does it bring something to music?
Yeah. So if I would say what my hobbies are, one thing that I enjoy, that I find peace doing, is I like gardening quite a bit. Now we're only starting to come into that period of time when we can garden, because we're coming out of winter. But when I'm gardening, it's a place for my mind to relax. And we need those places. We need that space where nothing is happening, really, where it's almost a very Zen thing going on, where action is taking place, and it's not mindless action. It's very thoughtful action, but the action is the action is not necessarily related to a lot of mental activity, but detail-oriented work that you love to do. Again, another hobby is reading. I haven't done as much of it, but I'm getting a little reading done. And I want to read about subjects that fascinate me, that maybe even strengthen what I do as an artist, which may be books on psychology, books on philosophy, anything that's exploring a new place for me. This constant search for oneself. I mean, what are we trying to do here as a musician anyway? We're trying to find out who we are and be that, right? So if these other activities are helping me find out who I am, then I think they're very beneficial.
And what about pencils?
Pencils. Well, that's, of course, that's all related to the music thing. I pencils. That's not so much of a hobby as it is. When I'm old school. I like to write things down by hand, and also, if you're a singer, you're also getting into lyric writing. And so, you know, I have my book that I use. So I'm writing lyrics down. I'm writing ideas down. And so there's something for me that's just gratifying about it. Feels good to do it. You know, like the pencil feels good, literally. When I was in college and we had to write charts and big band charts and everything else, I mean, everything was done by hand then. I mean, can you imagine writing big band charts by hand? And you're writing out parts for every single player. We had very specific pencils that we were required to use. But when you're writing so much, you know, then you start getting, you know, you don't want a hard pencil. You don't want something that's too soft. And so then that kind of started the love for pencils, and that, you know, I couldn't stand to write with a number 2 pencil. It's too hard. It doesn't feel good. So even when I'm writing lyrics, if something feels good when I'm writing, I don't know, it just adds to the experience of it all. And so, yeah, I do have a collection of pencils, and it's just become like a little fun obsession. But I have a nice collection of maybe, you know, I have pencils from the 1800s. It just turned into something else, you know. There are very specific pencils that I like to write with, and then I would try various pencils from different countries, different woods, different leads, different softness, hardness, and it's not really a hobby. It's just a little obsession. So, and erasers, you know, because I want something that's going to be clean and does the job well, and I don't know, ritualistic. So when I get into writing charts and I get into doing things, it's a very ritualistic thing for me. When I have to sit down and, all right, we're going to write this chart out, or we're going to write this out. I want things to feel good. I want things to erase well if I need them to. I want the pencil sharpened so much, and I want a certain softness and a feel to the pencil when I'm writing. I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy, but yeah.
All right. My question is more for students. Can you talk a bit about what do you do before you start designing your practicing routine?
What do I do before I start designing my practice routine? Yes. I don't know if I understand.
The thing is that a couple of years ago, we talked about setting goals first.
Right.
And maybe you can talk a bit more about this.
Yeah, I mean, we get to the whole, you know, the unexamined life is not worth living type of thing. But if we're just doing and we have no specific goals, we're kind of, as we might say in English, peeing in the wind, you know. There's no control over what's happening. I mean, we can have goals, and that's great. I even sometimes in the past have had one wall in my bedroom which has certain goals for certain things that I'm working on. I mean, even this record that I was telling you about, I had new CD, piano players I was interested in having, songs that I was interested in recording with each person, and then of course I'm crossing things off the list. That's just a recording. And then I have another list on there, and it says, you know, radio contacts, touring for a specific country, and you have all the subcategories of it. And what are my goals as far as that's concerned? Writing new music, writing out lists of, sometimes it's interesting. Well, it's not that interesting. I think it's very common when a musician has something specific that they have coming up. Let's say we have a recording coming up. Suddenly we are able to write music. We're able to arrange music because we have this goal. We have to, you know, hey, it's coming up. It's in 2 weeks. I've got to finish this, right? Suddenly we become very productive, right? And then when there's nothing necessarily happening, we get very lazy and we don't have these goals set out. And so I think we have to pretend or act or behave. We have these goals that we want to meet. Hey, look, the date's coming up. I have to finish this by a certain date. Whether it's an artificial goal or not, I think it's very healthy for us to keep these mini goals, have these mini goals, and have the larger goals, and then the even larger goals, the subsets of all these things. So even before I sit at the table. I mean, I know what I have to do today. I have work to do. I have a writing session later on tonight. I know that it's going to be imperative that I've gone over some of the music and added something, brought something to the table with the musician that I'm writing with this evening. If I have now in this time, what's our recording? What's the pressure right now? Well, the pressure right now might be I've decided in a week I'm going to go online and do a live performance. Okay, well that's pressure because now I've not immense pressure, but it's a goal that now what songs am I going to play for that? And now I can start designing a criteria of how I'm going to practice. I want to play for this much time. What songs am I going to practice? What do I need to work on in these particular songs, these specific songs, et cetera, et cetera. And so setting these mini goals up for ourselves, which have more medium goals, which have larger goals, which have giant goals, you know. What do I want to be? My goal might be, I want to win a Grammy and I want to play with this person and this person and this person. You know, however realistic or unrealistic those goals may be. My goals as a musician aren't really centered around winning a trophy or putting something on a table that I can say, look what I've done. I would prefer to have my goals be more of a self-satisfactory goal where I've composed something and I'm satisfied with it, and then the fruition of that is having it recorded and or performing it. those are wonderful goals for me. I'm less, I think, goal oriented with career, and I should be more, because I mean, how many years do I really have left? I mean, at some point, and it sounds strange to say, but at some point in your life, you're gonna say that to yourself. Look, I'm in my early 50s. How many more years do I really have? So let's start setting these goals. Let's start trying to reach some of these things before it's too late. I mean, we never know. It could be tomorrow for any of us. You're 20 years old. It could be tomorrow. That's the end, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s. But if I have a long life and I'm 50 years old, how many more years do I really have that I'm touring? Maybe 25? You know, what are my goals within that 25 years? And I'll be like 77 years old at that point, you know. Will I still be able to be on the road? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it's important to look at things in those perspectives too, you know. And what do I want to do? Are those my goals? Are my goals just to be, I'm happy, content creating music, teaching, I can make a living. I'm satisfied with that. I don't need a lot of attention. I just want to create and play music. There's nothing wrong with that goal, you know, because the whole point of all this is happiness, isn't it? You know, and so I'm seeking happiness, and whatever my goals may be, I should try and fulfill those goals to best of my ability. Of course, we also have the added strain of we've got to make money in order to live. And I think as long as our goals are being met and we're happy, everything else is, you know, just white noise. You know, this becoming popular, becoming famous, becoming whatever, those are secondary issues to us and the enjoyment that we really get from this, from being an artist, from being a craftsman. You know, it's great to have those goals, you know, if that's what your goals are. But you know, it's, I think sometimes we have to examine what it is really that we want, what's going to bring us the ultimate happiness.
Okay, you say about examining yourself and understanding what we want. It's basically understanding your identity, right?
Yeah, and you know, the thing about that also is that it's an evolving thing. What I want today might not be what I want tomorrow. Who you were as a 10-year-old child is not who you are today. And you know, maybe you wanted to be an astronaut when you were 10. Well, now maybe your goal is you want to sound like Coltrane, you know? Okay, well, your goals have obviously changed. Maybe in 5 years, you know, you say, I want to be a great educator. That brings me satisfaction. That's what I want to do. Maybe 5 years later, you know, maybe because these internal struggles have gone on through the history of music. You know, at some point, Train said, why am I playing all this bebop vocabulary? That's not who I am. What is my vocabulary? And then he went and studied with Dennis Sandoli in Philadelphia and worked through Sloninsky. And then we start to have albums like A Love Supreme and a lot of the later works before he died in 1967, before he died July 2nd, 1967. But those later albums were really, really John Coltrane. Now, sure, he played the bebop vocabulary in a style that only he could play it in, and it's recognizable. And he was even of course, a pioneer with the whole sheets of sound and basically playing harmonically on a melodic instrument by playing these sheets of sound. And he reached those goals. He reached the pinnacle of what he could do. He took playing bebop and hard bop, whatever period you want, however you want to identify it, to a place that nobody else had taken it to, or that he could take it to. He could go no further. And then it came to a point where, like, well, who am I? You know, and that's, I think, a struggle that a lot of us, and struggle's not a right word, challenge that we come to, a place in our life where we say, is this really who I am? Is, quoting this thing, is that the thing that's going to make people say, he's great, look how he did, or am I okay with people not understanding what I'm doing? Because every great and new change that comes with a challenge from the establishment, whether it's Ornette Coleman and people saying, is this real or is this just some BS? Is he really making this stuff? Or people listening to Train and saying, what is this new thing that he's doing? I don't get it, right? It's okay. He didn't mind that people didn't get it, The first one through the door is the ones that, even Thelonious Monk. It goes on and on and on. We can name all the iconic musicians who did something different, or were coming into who they were, or they were already who they were, and people didn't understand it, and so they want to talk bad about it because it wasn't easy to understand in the format of what had been established before. Mm-hmm. So
okay, another question is about teacher. Is teacher important nowadays? In which stages of let's say musicianship it is important to have a teacher, and when you can be your own teacher?
Right. Well, I think in some respects we are always our own teacher, but music is taught so unorganically, I believe. And I think sometimes we find out that we have to go back in time and relearn things a different way because we've been taught in a certain way. It's very, music education is a very strange thing for me. The most natural of methods that I see out there are things like the Suzuki method, where kids are learning to play their instruments without even knowing the names of the notes. Can they play what they hear? Shouldn't that be the first goal? That we can play on our instrument what we hear in our mind? Because I think one of the biggest things I see in education or in jazz students is they come to this place where they see a chord change. They can play every amazing thing possible over this chord change because they know what rules are being told to them that they're allowed to and or supposed to play over this. But do they really hear it? Or are they just playing things they know will fit? And so I think that's the big disconnect in music education, is that students aren't taught to play what they hear. They're taught to play what they know works. Now, many times, one comes before the other. They're taught to play what works, and then they eventually hear that, and then it becomes honest. But you see sometimes, why should they have to go through that step? Why shouldn't they already hear what's honest and then be taught those concepts? There are many paths that go up the mountain and come to the same place, but I think sometimes we're learning many concepts in music in a very unhealthy, unorganic way. And so at what stage is important? I think all stages are important to have a mentor. We're talking the great John Coltrane went and studied with somebody after he had recorded some of his most quintessential records. Why is John Coltrane studying with somebody? Well, man, because he felt that he had something to learn from somebody. And that was the beautiful thing. You find these people, especially the ones who become icons, are people who are constantly wanting to learn, and they don't have such an ego that they can't learn from somebody else. Look, Miles Davis, even when he was recording Kind of Blue, was hanging out with George Russell, talking to George Russell a lot about, about the Lydian chromatic concept. They wanted to learn. They're hungry. Was George Russell a teacher? I don't know if he was a teacher, but it was new information that he could get. So again, Miles was the teacher, but he was taking information. He was always wanting new information. So at what point do we not need a teacher? I don't know. I mean, I think there's always something to learn from somebody. So, but if we have the intelligence to teach, to take that information and apply it, we're the ultimate teacher. Look, man, I give the same information to student after student after student after student. Why does one student excel and another one does not? Because one student is a better teacher for themselves than another. They're teaching themselves better than another student. So maybe there's an art in how to teach yourself. Maybe that should be taught. That's a class, how to teach yourself, how to be a good teacher for yourself, and it's interesting. It gets into pedagogy, and the psychology of music. It's fascinating, but it's a great question.
Okay, great. Okay, the last thing I want you to talk about is, could you give 2 pieces of advice? One would be very practical and very, let's say, toolish, and the other one will be more about broad understanding of music or life in general, or your approach or something.
I think we've covered them to a certain degree as far as any advice that I would give, and that would be to manage your goals, and managing those goals in a large sense, and then breaking them down into subcategories and subcategories and subcategories till you come down to the minutia of things. Well, I've got a shed on this specific concept because I can't do it, which leads me to be able to do this over this song, which is a song that I want to record on a record, which is a goal of mine to do in order to become this in life, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So I think, setting these goals in tiers is a very healthy thing. And be a dreamer. It's odd to me many times that we're very not supportive. We see somebody else being successful and we're like, we're not happy for somebody else's success. We're almost happy to see them fail, and it's disturbing to me. It's something, part of the human condition, but I think we call it, I think the word is Schadenfreude, which is a German word, and it kind of means, that we're not necessarily wishing bad things to happen to other people, but that we get pleasure in other people's failing, right? And it's a terrible thing. Maybe you have somebody and their career starts going very well, and you have this jealousy towards what they're doing, and next thing you know, something happens and they failed at something, and you get a pleasure from this. We have to examine ourselves and go, why are we thinking that way? Okay, I got off the question, but anyway, so I think we need to get, in addition to this macrocosm to the microcosm of our goals. The same thing applies as to what we've already talked before, that we're not so tunnel visioned, that everything that we do is not about music. I think, again, Billy Hart had a great example of, you want to be a complete musician, it means you have to have lived life. It means you can bring something else to the table. It means that maybe you understand some different aspects of this world. Maybe some musicians I've known in my life, they're so proud because I've never had to do any other job except music. And I'm thinking to myself a little bit, I feel sorry for you that you really don't understand what it's like to do something else, because those things are very enriching. And whether you're a bricklayer, whether you're a landscaper, whether you're a dishwasher. I mean, Train washed dishes. I mean, Charlie Parker washed dishes uptown, right? I'm not saying that brought a lot to the experience, but maybe human relations and talking to people and getting to know people through those circumstances gave him something else, you know? So that we shouldn't be not only not ashamed to do something other than music, but we should welcome those things, whether they're hobbies or whether they're a second job. You know, somebody said to me, it was a hard, difficult financial time, and they said, why don't you go teach at this school? And I said, I don't want to teach at there. I would rather dig a hole in the ground with a shovel. You know, that would bring me more pleasure, more gratification, doing something physical, being in touch with the land. When I first moved back to the north from Texas, I lived on a farm. The happiest days of my life, I'd work on the farm maybe 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, taking care of lots of horses, doing landscaping, driving a tractor, baling hay, and then at night, and then I'd practice the rest of the day, and then I'd go to a gig at night, or I'd drive to New York and I'd go to jam sessions all night long, come back early in the morning, feed the horses, work on the farm a little bit, practice for hours on end, go to a gig at night. I mean, the end of the day, my body physically felt, I'm like, this is the most human I've ever been. You know, my body is tired physically from doing physical work. My soul is enriched from playing music at night. What do I want? You know, it's still one of the happiest periods of my life. And I wasn't even concerned about, you know, necessarily where I'm going. Yes, I had goals. I wanted to get to New York City. I had already made a recording with Jean-Michel Pilc and Ari Honig and John Swana. And I had started to play with Dave Liebman at the time. These were all small goals that I had. I want to play with these guys. I want to get to know them. You know, I want to get to know the great players. I want to surround myself with these things. But at the same time, I felt very enriched in life because I was experiencing thunderstorms and the effects of how animals react. I mean, all these things are teachers. And so if we can really learn these lessons in life that have nothing to do with music, but we can bring it to music, that's what it's all about. Then our story means something, you know, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to tell a story when we're playing music. And if we can bring intention, where does that intention comes from? That intention comes from actually having lived through something, you know? So I think it's very important maybe to have hobbies, as you talked about, or bring other things in life to the table. It makes it rich. It makes it that much richer, you know?
Great. That's a really great advice and really great mindset and vision.
Yeah.
Really like it. Yeah. Okay, I think we can finish on that.
Great.
Thing, you know.
Great.
And thanks to our viewers and listeners. That was JD Walter. This was Ivan Baryshnikov. I'm gonna make sure to put the links to your music and website so people can subscribe to your mailing list.
Yeah, do the Instagram and the website thing and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Great. Okay, let's say goodbye to viewers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then...
Thanks so much for watching, and he's got a great show going on. Tune in to his next episode, whoever that may be. And Vanya, thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me be a part of this. And we'll talk soon.